Rudy's Revelation.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in the country, and I think most Americans do.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. It is January 30th, 2025. So the confirmation hearings continue. RFK is facing a second round. Tulsi Gabbard is up. Kash Patel is up. These people must get confirmed. All right, let's get into the headlines for today, Thursday, January 30th. All right, first up, I'm going to start with a correction. Yesterday, I was talking about the German spy agency and using the wrong acronym. It's actually the BND, which is the German intelligence organization, which started with West Germany, but is now represents the United Germany. All right, let's get into the headlines. So first up, New York Post, new EPA chief Lee Zeldin has ambitious agenda and a plan to keep courts from overturning it. And One American News also reports Lee Zeldin confirmed as new Environmental Protection Agency administrator. Just the News is reporting Kash Patel to face Senate hearing in bid to reform scandal-plagued FBI. I don't know if scandaled is the correct word. It goes on to say his nomination roiled FBI insiders, with reports emerging that the Bureau could face mass resignations should he secure his post as director of the FBI. All these people are needed to reform government. There's a terrible amount of waste going on, and from a conservative perspective, that's certainly unwanted. But the main reason is that it's more than just graft. There's a lot of corruption having to do with the agencies, how they perform, and whether or not they're transparent with their duties. The article goes on to say a Trump advisor from the first administration, Kash Patel, has been a stalwart backer of Trump for most of his political tenure and a vocal critic of what he calls an institutional rot in key American agencies. His 2023 book, Government Gangsters, The Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle for Our Democracy, provided what President Donald Trump himself called a brilliant roadmap for uprooting politicized bureaucracy. Article goes on to say Trump picked Patel for the role in late November as grassroots supporters led cash only to trend on X. The then president-elect called Patel a brilliant lawyer, investigator, and America First fighter who has spent his career exposing corruption, defending justice, and protecting the American people. Well, I certainly hope that he gets confirmed. This is well needed. There should be a complete reformation of the federal government. The American taxpayer has been bilked over decades, if not centuries, due to the lack of oversight, particularly by the electorate. Real Clear Politics is reporting, why does the New York Times continue to print front page lies about RFK Jr.? This is a commentary by Blake Fleetwood. And the article goes on to say, any New York City reader looking at the buzzy front page headline below would immediately think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a madman. Can he really be an advocate for repealing the polio vaccine as disease? that has killed and crippled tens of millions of kids. The headline goes on to say Kennedy's lawyer has asked the FDA to revoke approval of the polio vaccine. Now, to the ordinary reader, the headline says pretty clearly that Kennedy asked his lawyer to revoke the polio vaccine. The headline makes a shocking accusation that Kennedy is in favor of banning the polio vaccine. Well, that's just not true. The article goes on to say it's flagrantly false and a gross distortion of the truth. There's not one polio vaccine. There are 6 different polio vaccines that are used worldwide. Moreover, Aaron Siri, the lawyer in question, does not represent Kennedy in his petition. Contrary to the misrepresentation the New York Times has been making, Kennedy does not oppose vaccines or want to take away anybody's vaccine. All 7 of his children were vaccinated, including with the polio vaccine, and his grandkids were also vaccinated against polio. The point here, and I read New York Times headlines all the time, is it's a mischaracterization. They find something, they figure out how they can spin it, how they can distort it to make it a smear against Kennedy, because what we're talking about here is millions of dollars slushing around in the political circles of Washington, D.C., put there by the pharmaceutical industry, who are the producers of vaccines. Article goes on to say, Kennedy does not question the long-term of some vaccines and wants further studies about them. I think they meant long-term effects. When RFK Jr. is quoted as saying no vaccines are safe, he is saying no vaccines are completely safe and they all have side effects. And when he talks about this, he talks about really what the meaning is everything in the environment, your body, everybody's individual makeup, biology reacts differently to things in the environment and to medicines, vaccines, etc. That's why you don't see consistent side effects in everybody who takes a certain drug or vaccine. And that's what he means by they're not completely safe. Every medical, everything has the risk of injuring somebody. So when you're talking about pharmaceuticals or vaccines, everybody is at risk. Some will be hurt by or experience side effects, and some won't. So when he says all vaccines are not safe, he's correct about that. Most importantly, he should make public the black box warnings, which are just for physicians and are rarely disclosed. And the black box warnings for pharmaceuticals are usually far worse than the side effects listed on the insert. The story goes on to say the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine supports Kennedy's positions regarding vaccine safety and has called for more funding for post-authorization vaccine safety. Really, the safety needs to be ahead of authorization. The safety measures, the safety checks, the testing. But if people want to try, they should be able to use the medicines. But authorization from the FDA, usually people think that, oh, it's safe. And there have been many things that have been authorized by the FDA which have not been safe. Progress in vaccine safety science has been understandably low. So the big breaking news today is Nicole Shanahan says she'll personally fund primary challengers against senators who don't vote for RFK Jr. It's going to be a lot, Nicole. So get ready. I hope this has a chilling effect on senators that are voting for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or not voting for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He needs to get in. Kash Patel needs to get in, and Tulsi Gabbard need to get in, because the resistance says it all. This is from Business Insider. Nicole Shanahan says she'll personally fund primary challengers against senators who vote against RFK Jr. So this is a bipartisan message, she says. This isn't just directed at Republicans. While Bobby may be willing to play nice, I won't. If you vote against him, I will personally fund challengers to primary you in your next election, and I will enlist hundreds of thousands to join me. Hundreds of thousands. So here's the list. Raphael Warnock of Georgia. These are Democrats. John Ossoff of Georgia. Republican Mitch McConnell, obviously, of Kentucky. Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who owes her political career to Mitch McConnell. Susan Collins of Maine, of course. And there's more. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Republican Senator James Langford of Oklahoma, Democrat Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Democrat Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Democrat Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada. So good for Nicole. I hope your strategy wins him approval. From Fox News, Maha reporter says American health is at stake unless RFK Jr. can bring radical transparency to the system. We are standing at a fork in time. We are standing at a fork in the road with regard to health, says Daily Nuri CEO Caroline Carolero. I agree. The problem with the federal government is the lack of transparency. And for most people to understand, it is under the guise of national security that most of what the federal government does and the money they spend on their duties is classified, and it shouldn't be. The American taxpayer should have the right to know pretty much everything except the development of new weapon systems, perhaps. Okay, and you could lump in there spycraft, things and agents that are, clandestine. All right, let's move on to Tulsi Gabbard. The AP is reporting a mysterious meeting with Syrian president is at the center of the spy chief's nomination fight. The reality behind this is when she met with Bashar al-Assad, who she said that wasn't the intent of the trip, but she got a meeting with him and decided to keep it. Gabbard defended the trip by saying she had gone to try to find a peaceful resolution to a long and bloody conflict, but the details of what the pair discussed remain a mystery. Dogging, Gabbard to this day and has taken on a new salience as rebels have swept Assad from power and President Donald Trump has nominated her to be the nation's spy chief. Well, we all know what's really at the center of this, folks. So whether this comes up in the hearing or not is yet to be seen. The reality is that Bashar al-Assad likely did not gas his own people, that was actually the rebels that gassed civilians. And the evidence suggests that because Obama had drawn a line in the sand and that any chemical attack that was seen to come from the Syrian government, that the United States would get directly involved. The reality there is it's unlikely that Bashar al-Assad would commit such an attack, especially after the American administration would draw that red line. And CBS News is reporting Tulsi Gabbard's nomination at risk of being blocked as she That's the confirmation hearing. Here's what to know. Gabbard, a former Democratic congressman from Hawaii and combat veteran, faces a narrow path to confirmation and concerns over her decision to meet with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad in 2017. Her past push to pardon National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden. Why would you want to... Oh, hold on a second. Her views on Ukraine and her previous opposition to renewing a key government surveillance authority known as Section 702 or FISA. All right, let's take these one at a time, first of all. She met with a Syrian dictator. Now, the state of Syria was not an enemy of the United States, was not on the sponsor of terrorism list. There is no reason to dissuade any politician from visiting Syria or its leader for that matter. The CBS News here refers to him as a dictator. Okay, he's a dictator. But you can't, you're a congressperson, you can't meet with him. They called it a secret meeting, but it wasn't a secret meeting because people, sitting Congress members who visit, who undertake foreign diplomacy must register, and obviously the administration and or the congressional hierarchy needs to be notified. So it wasn't, they lead people to believe that it's a secret meeting, and it's not a secret meeting. What they discussed was secret. There was no record taken, which is the most part. I don't think she's been secretive about the meeting of what they discussed. But I know what they discussed. Okay, her push to pardon National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden. Okay, Edward Snowden leaked sensitive documents that he was a whistleblower because those documents outline criminal behavior by the United States spy agencies et al. Also, I believe military. So any whistleblower who is, whatever documents he releases, if those documents show illicit or illegal behavior by the federal government, well, of course he should be pardoned. The guy was a hero. And so if you don't know what we're talking about, that was back in 2013, you should look at the documents that he disclosed. It laid out old, mind you, spying and surveillance techniques used by the NSA and other agencies to spy on the American people. And then, of course, Ukraine, that's self-explanatory. We shouldn't be involved in this aggression against Russia. It's NATO aggression. And FISA, which is Section 702, which came out of the Patriot Act, which said you can spy, the federal surveillance apparatus can spy on American citizens. They just have to get a warrant through a secret court known as the FISA court. And what we saw with President Trump is the FISA documents were fraudulent. So that's the problem with the FISA court, is the folks that use the FISA court aren't always truthful with the justices involved in that. Fox News, Trump signs executive order stripping federal funding from schools that teach CRT, supporting school choice. The executive order's mandate ending radical, I thought it was racial, ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling, expanding educational freedom and opportunities for families. All right, so CRT, if you didn't know, is critical race theory. So gender, I think three things really. Critical race theory, which denotes, states, this came out of the 1619 Project that was published by the New York Times, which is a faulty document. that the idea that the United States was built on slavery. There was mercantile trade that involved slavery, but things like the 1619 Project lead you to believe that everything was built by slave labor, and it just wasn't the case. Predominantly used in the agriculture of the South, in the textile industry, because the South wasn't very populated at the time. But industrial use of slaves was not used up north. And also with gender theory, none of this shit should be taught in schools. And not even climate theory shouldn't be taught in schools. And that was the most widespread falsehoods that were being taught to young school children and really scaring people that humans are destroying the planet. Reuters reports exclusive USDA Inspector General escorted out of her office after defying White House. You might have seen this story. Security agents escorted the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Agriculture out of her office on Monday after she refused to comply with her firing by the Trump administration. Phyllis Fong, which is suspect. I hate to profile, but a 22-year veteran of the department had earlier told colleagues that she intended to stay after the White House terminated her. How? It's like a George Costanza moment. I'm not leaving. CNBC reports White House says Trump funding freeze remains in effect despite rescinding OMB memo. I think it's the Office of Management and Budget. What is happening here is it was put on hold by a judge for her to look at what was frozen, and people's benefits, much to what Chuck Schumer said was lies. The benefits to people receiving federal benefits are not going to be frozen. This is funding that is going to things other than benefits received by citizens. So it's going to departments. You know, it trickles down, certainly, but the Democrat, the left, the progressives, the spenders of the money are trying to say it will affect future distribution of funds, but the funding of these agencies is going to be put on hold anyway, until DOJ takes a look at it and things are examined and studied and people find out where the money is going. The White House has formally rescinded a controversial memo that had ordered a freeze on federal grants and loans, but the White House also said federal funding freeze remains in full force and effect to give agencies time to review programs for their compliance with President Donald Trump's agenda. The freeze, which was set to take effect late Tuesday afternoon, was paused Tuesday by a federal judge to give her time to consider the arguments challenging its legality. The memo ordering the freeze has been issued to the Office of Management and Budget. So I got that acronym right. I'm a conservative. I think every dollar spent should be scrutinized. And it hasn't been for decades and decades, so it should be. Postmillennial is reporting Trump's DHS stops all grant funding to NGOs that are working to facilitate illegal immigration. Today, we are announcing that we have stopped all grant funding that's being abused by NGOs to facilitate illegal immigration into this country. If you watched the podcast yesterday or were listening, I went into this in great detail, and I've been doing it, I think, all week, that there's an umbrella group. There was an umbrella group that started all this and then trickled down funding to other NGOs. You know, and NGOs can be as big as the Open Society Foundation or other ones like the Melinda Gates Foundation. All these are NGOs, but they spin off smaller NGOs that act like shell companies where funding can be sloshed around. But a lot of these NGOs are down in Central and South America facilitating migrants' trip to the United States. That's where all the cash cards, the debit cards come from, is from these NGOs. And they're given maps. A lot of times they're given new shoes, boots, etc. Breaking news from the New York Times that Trump says that U.S. will hold migrants at Guantanamo Bay. The president suggested that 30,000 migrants could be housed at the base. It's unclear how the plan will take shape. And use anything, all resources at your disposal. That's the way to get things done. Nothing is off limits. So Vox reports Trump and Musk's plan for a massive purge of the federal workforce, an ambitious plan to move fast and break things in the government, is underway. There's an ideology behind it. So Vox says there's an ideology behind it. In a sense, there is. It's called conservatism. It's not about breaking things. It's about reforming things and doing that in such a way as to save money. The taxpayer dollar. PJ Media reports Trump's civil service reform has nothing to do with politicization. So it seems that PJ Media and the Vox are at odds. Why? That's not surprising. But let's see what PJ Media says. There are a lot of people complaining and siding with Vox that work in the federal government. Here's a note. I've been at OPM. I've been an OPM, that's Office of Personal Management employee, for nearly a decade and a federal employee for almost 20 years. I've never witnessed anything even remotely close to what's happening right now. In short, there's a hostile takeover of the federal civil service. Let me say this in no uncertain terms. OPM has been compromised and taken over. Good. Because it's been taken over by the President of the United States, an elected official, versus unelected bureaucrats like this person here, who might have been placed under the guise of corporate capture. He goes on to say the very backbone of the American government, the HR of all HR in the U.S. government, has been taken over by outside politicals. Now, that's just a strange, because outside politicals, again, is a mischaracterization. Elected officials. So the U.S. government has been taken over by elected officials, not outside politicals. So you got to know how the U.S. government works. PJ Media goes on to say the author of those two paragraphs clearly knows nothing about the origins of the career of the federal civil service and its relationship to the only popularly elected executive branch official, the President of the United States, as I just said. They refer to the Pendleton Act of 1883, was signed by Chester Arthur, who succeeded Garfield following the latter's assassination by an angry spoils system job seeker. So basically what the guy said was, the guy who killed Garfield said, Garfield was elected and he didn't give me a government job. What is now known as OPM was originally called the Civil Service Commission, with its 3 members being presidential appointees. The main task of the commission was to establish a merit-based job examinations process to end the distribution of government jobs. In other words, to not make it politicized, to have someone come in and make sure that the people that were given the jobs were qualified to do such jobs. The main task of the commission was to establish a merit-based examinations process to end the distribution of government jobs as the spoils of rightfully gained by the winner of the most recent presidential election. To that end, the Pendleton Act said this about the role of the president: subject to the rules that may be made by the president. So the president decides who gets in there and who gets removed. However, the OPM decides whether that person is qualified. So they could reject people that are put up by the president. Federalist is reporting polls show majorities of Americans support Trump's mass deportations. We've known that for a long, long time. That's why the Democrats really didn't get elected, because that was something that people could see and touch and feel. You know, when you drop off or you visit your kid in class and you see that they're, 3/4 of the class is, young Hispanics or people of foreign origin. Post-Millennial is reporting migrants have been illegally voting in Maine's election since 2016. 10 people who are either legal or illegal immigrants and are also enrolled in Maine Care have voted in the state's election since 2016. I know you're saying it's only 10 people, but 10 people is 10 people. They don't have the right to vote. The Maine Wire, which reviewed the records from Maine Care and voter data from the central voter registration system that is maintained by the state secretary of state, reported that of the 25 non-citizens enrolled in Maine Care, 10 were registered to vote. Under Maine Care's records, alien status is denoted by 1, U.S. citizen, which includes natural-born or naturalized citizens; 2, legal alien, which includes green card holders, temporary protected status holders, and other legal immigrant designations as 3 others, which includes which are unapproved asylum applicants on parole, illegal immigrants, or others who are not legally authorized in the United States. Those in the second and third categories are ineligible to register to vote or to cast a ballot. The 10 individuals noted by the outlet fell under those 2 categories, and 8 of them have cast votes in their names since 2016. Well, the margin was more than 10 votes in Maine, but it doesn't matter. The people that say that illegal aliens aren't voting, they're wrong for the simple reason that they are voting. Is it of any consequence? Hard to say. The story goes on to say, in the state of Maine, it is illegal for non-citizens to register to vote or cast a ballot, and the state also prohibits people assist in voter registration or ballot casting if they know the person they're helping is a non-citizen and ineligible to vote. Non-citizens also face federal penalties for the act. Indeed, the outlet noted that the CVR data has not been updated for the presidential election that took place in 2024, but at least one illegal alien registered to vote as a Democrat and cast a ballot in the 2024 Democrat primary. The Federalist is reporting the dirty dozen. Here are wasteful federal grants you're paying for as a taxpayer. From $100,000 for girls' fun run in Gaza to $700,000 to push edible insects, taxpayers are getting ripped off. Indeed, I don't want to fund any of those. The $100,000 fun run, 2-year grant expected to top $1.5 billion to Florida State University to fund Black feminist epistemologies, building a sisterhood in computing. Oh, brother. I don't think they should fund any of this friggin' crap. $119,000 for a conference titled reimagining biology education through social justice, gender inclusive adaptations to biology teaching. Oh, brother. 717,000 Ohio State University. For cultural resistance in the USA and Europe that impedes the acceptance of insect proteins as a food source. Almost $1 million, man. 399,000 to Montana State University, this DEI project, to sponsor and honor indigenous knowledge by infusing native ways of knowing into engineering education without engaging in the misappropriation of indigenous knowledge. Hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars being dedicated to this. This is all DEI crap. Who cares? That shit just shouldn't be funded. Indigenous, all this sociology nonsense is what I just said it was, nonsense. Institute of Museum and Library Services, $350,000 to the University of Wisconsin system to investigate play-based programs and spaces at museums and develop a diversity audit tool for practitioners to examine their play programs and spaces for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Wow. $634,000 also to the University of Wisconsin. Provide federal tax dollars for the exploration of urgent yet underexplored dimensions of equity-minded pedagogical change work in higher education. Brother. National Endowment of the Humanities, $54,000, let's say $55,000 to support a critical game study at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And that was the university that created COVID-19 or studied, I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. Studied chimeric organisms, specifically the chimeric coronaviruses. Okay? Scratch the former. So this critical game study, rhetorical and literary theories together with feminist studies, queer studies, and ethnic studies to investigate how game narratives shape and are shaped by power structures and cultural representations. Holy shit. Well, it's only $55,000, so we're paying a professor to teach that shit. Almost $800,000 to the University of Texas, Austin. The 5-year grant funded through 2029 promotes the testing of the hypothesis that cis heteronormativity, the societal belief that everyone is cisgender and heterosexual, that increased risk for exposure to general ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that cisnormativity leads to cis heterosexism, or CGM, social and gender minority identity-based discrimination, mistreat and violence exposure, and that exposure to cis heterosexism. Fuck you, fuck queer. You want to be queer? I'm not saying you can't be queer. I'll accept it. I won't promote it, but I'll accept it. I don't care. You want to be queer? But I don't want tax dollars funding queer theory in colleges or anywhere else. I just don't. If you're a citizen, or even if you're a legal resident in this country, everybody is treated equally. Okay? If you have face tattoos and piercings all over your face, and you think you're being discriminated against when you're getting a job, think that through. But most people don't consider homosexuality, particularly, or race, in hiring. They don't. But if you're visibly a man with a beard and you come into your job interview wearing a dress, it might be distracting for other employees. It goes on. $445,000 to Ohio State University for Girls on Rock program, which strives to build an inclusive outdoor STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, a mentorship experience increasing the diversity in geosciences with respect to gender, race, and ethnicity. None of that should be in there. If you want to increase the likelihood that girls get into science and technology, I'm all for that. Department of Health and Human Services, $600,000 to the University of Virginia. The grant will identify and measure domains of structural ableism, which parallels foundational work across other forms of structural oppression, such as structural racism, classism, ageism, sexism, heterosexism. It's $100,000 per ism. Before I go on, I just have to say, ideology, which is an ism, you're free to hold ideological views. Doesn't even make you an ideologue. Ideologue is someone that holds to that ideology despite contrary proof or argument. You can believe in an ism. It doesn't mean you're oppressing people. You know, if I'm staffing a warehouse, I'm not going to get the guy in the wheelchair, no offense. Or I might not get a small woman. You know, if it's a big woman, if she's a brawny woman, great, you're hired if you can lift the box. But we're going back to a merit-based system because you need people who could do the job and do the job well. That's how you succeed. It's not about who's on the bench or who gets played. It's about what they can do for the team. National Science Foundation doled out more than $112,000 to Rutgers University to develop theory around process of social control, state practices, and human agency about the deportation of immigrants with criminal records. The study, which concluded in 2022, was supposed to deepen the understanding of the relationship between citizenship, the law, and policing practices that have so impacted racialized immigrant communities. Radicalized immigrant communities about their handling of immigrants with criminal records. Really disappointing that the not even liberals, that they are liberal in their spending because they spend money on this shit, but the progressives buttressing this kind of indoctrination in higher education. Let's go to some tech news. We're going to start out with Fox News here. Warehouse robots used AI to play real-life Tetris to handle more than ever before. Revolutionary warehouse efficiency, one box at a time. So they're teaching the warehouse robot through playing the game Tetris. Now, what we do need to understand here is, and go back a little bit and try to remember that the Chinese made open source learning tool for robots, an AI learning tool for robots. And they made it open source. So everybody that was having trouble humanizing robots now have access to this software. It's AI-based software that is used for robots to learn how to do things. More tech news. This is from the Hollywood Reporter. AI commercials are going to take over the Super Bowl this year. AI-focused ads are up and movie spots are down. Fox says a 30-second ad hits an eye-watering 8 million. So, as I said previously, you're not going to really notice it right away. But what we need to understand is that AI is job displacement for humans. And as I mentioned before, I was a union chair when I worked in journalism, and one of the main things was constantly keeping our eye out for technology that was going to sideline workers, union workers. So the corporation could bring in a machine that gets rid of your job. And you have to install the machine and what have you. So unions deal with this all the time. This is like nothing that civilization has ever seen before. The amount of jobs that are humans that are going to be displaced or replaced in their jobs by AI is going to be staggering. They're going to make it seem innocuous at first. Oh, it's just going to help you with your duties. And then you realize that AI is doing your job more and more and faster and better. And AI doesn't have to go to sleep. It doesn't have to go home. It can work 24/7. More about AI. This is from the Wall Street Journal. DeepSeek's chatbot works like its U.S. rivals until you ask it about Tiananmen Square. New Chinese AI tool gives more limited and propaganda-infused information on sensitive topics. And we understand this because AI, we saw the goofs that AI was making, the Black Jesus and Black George Washington and all these different things. That's going to be on steroids with the Chinese communist version of AI. And I think that's what the powers that be want. And they've proven it in the United States with the tests that were done with ChatGPT. And now it's even more so from China. And like the elite always want to do, they want a synthesis of what's going on here and what's going on there. And so either, doesn't matter how you stack it, the synthesis will bring a more censored, propaganda-infused information from AI. And so the reality that AI spits out will be more distorted than the psychedelic dreamscapes that AI weaves up. All right, some financial news. Reuters is reporting the Fed leaves rates unchanged, sees no hurry to cut again. This is in direct response to what Trump wanted, which was to cut rates. Now, why does he want that? Is to spur growth. But the Fed is going to hold him to task. He's going to have to spur growth before they cut rates. So it's okay for me because I have some money in savings and I want to keep getting that high interest rate. But if he gets growth rolling before the Fed cuts rates, when the Fed cuts rates, that will supercharge any growth that's already happening. So if Powell stays in, what I suspect is that he will delay rate cuts as long as he can to hamstring Trump's efforts to restart growth. The reason the whole context of this is really this next article, also from Reuters. European Central Bank cuts rates and leaves room for more easing as growth lags. So the European Central Bank is cutting rates, but the Fed isn't. Now, the European Central Bank has also cut rates previously and growth stagnated. And growth is still and they're trying to cut rates to spur growth. I don't think that's going to work. The problem with Europe, particularly the European Union, is they're too authoritarian. So a free system is what spurs growth. That's why America has always been so great, because the system is free. As soon as you start becoming authoritarian, you're going to squelch growth because there are too many regulations. You can't do, if it caused you, let's say you have $50,000 to invest in opening a business, but it takes you $20,000 in regulation fees to start the business. That only leaves $30,000, and that might not be enough to rent space, to get inventory, etc., pay employees. More news from the Wall Street Journal. Meta, which is Facebook, Zuckerberg, to pay $25 million to settle a 2021 Trump lawsuit. The president has sued social media company after his accounts were suspended following January 6th riot. It's a riot. The Wall Street Journal says it's a riot. It's not an insurrection. And that bothers me so much when I still hear people using that term. Well, good. $25 million. Trump needs that money. He spent so much defending himself against the lawfare set forth by the Biden administration. So here's a telling headline. So Elon Musk was right. The Wall Street Journal reports SoftBank in talks to invest as much as $25 billion into OpenAI. The biggest ever investment in the ChatGPT maker would help cover its commitment to Stargate AI infrastructure venture. So if you remember, there was that big press conference that Trump held that said SoftBank was investing $500 billion into OpenAI, or $600 billion. And then the day after, Elon Musk says they don't have that money. They don't have $600 billion. They only have backing on $25 million or $20 million. I think he said $25 billion. So Elon Musk was right. So the Wall Street Journal now reports it's $25 billion. It's not $600 billion. All good. You can understand why Trump wanted to have that press conference and tout all this nonsense. But it's $25 billion, which is still a great amount, and it may be more. So the pledge might be there, but they only have $25 billion secured from investors. All right, a couple more articles before we close out here. Zero Hedge, visualizing how Americans spend their money. Consumer spending represents 68% of U.S. GDP, and this is why the United States is important. More than ever, Americans are using debt and credit cards to fund these purchases. In other words, subsidizing their income using credit cards. In the second half of 2024, household debt hit a record of $17.9 trillion. At the same time, credit card debt surpassed a historic $1 trillion, climbing by 8.3% over the time period of the year prior. This is the problem with people's finances, is when inflation kicked in, people that were making ends meet, and I've been in this position before, had to subsidize their income with credit card to cover their expenses. Well, you can't do that forever. At a certain point, you're going to have to pay up the credit card. So that's the problem. So let's look at the graph where people spend their money, because it's important. So this is averages, obviously. Average annual expenditures, $77,000. So it's an average. On average, housing, $25,000 on housing. Transportation, $13,000. So transportation is the third largest expenditure of most citizens in America. Personal insurance and pensions. So they pay in health insurance, other insurances, like auto insurance. If $13,000, if you're spending $13,000 on transportation, you got to insure that transportation if you own a car. So that's by law. So insurance is the third largest expenditure for household incomes. The fourth is healthcare, which is insurance. So the third and fourth largest expenditures for people within the United States is healthcare or insurance. Food at home, 6.1 thousand. Food away from home, 4,000. Entertainment, 3,500. Cash contributions, 2.4 thousand. Apparel and services, 2,000. Education, 1.7 thousand. Miscellaneous, 1.8 thousand. Personal care products and services, $950 per year. Alcoholic beverages, 637. Tobacco, 370. Reading, 117,000. That should be more. Well, that's just kind of interesting breakdown. You would think it would be housing and then food, but it isn't. So it's housing, transportation, and then personal insurance and paying into pensions, et cetera, retirement. Healthcare, which is insurance based mostly. And food at home, and then food out. And then the other disposable income, entertainment, donations, cash contributions. What is that? Tips? Hard to say. Last couple of stories here before we close out. The Fox News is reporting that MSNBC primetime lineup has worst January ever among demographic coveted by advertisers. MSNBC averaged only 63,000 demo viewers between the primetime hours of 8 and 11. That is the most coveted. Particularly the 8 o'clock hour is the most coveted among all demographics. And so MSNBC is dying. We all know that. Trump said that publicly. Everybody is mocked. And what do? The hosts are doing the same thing they always do. Actually, Joy Reid has gotten even worse. Guys like Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow, they've all doubled down on the new resistance, and people are just tired of it. You know, even the people that were in the original Trump resistance have either come around or they're just tired of it. They said, they tell themselves, I'm not going to go through another 4 years of riling myself up every time Donald Trump tweets something and then it's reported on MSNBC and Joy Reid tells you it's because Trump is Hitler. Here's some promising news. InfoWars. Alex Jones, I've been invited to the White House. So he writes on X, I've been invited to come next week. Should I go to DC? ? Imagine if Alex Jones gets a White House press pass. I think that's great, man. That would be great. To see Alex Jones in the White House press room. He would probably not go. It'd be too much of a distraction, but maybe one of his reporters could go. I mean, it would just be a nod to the fact that InfoWars or Alex Jones has broken a lot of important news. I mean, most of the stuff that RFK Jr. is talking about, Alex Jones has been talking about for years, particularly chemicals in the food and water that are well documented, and also the national security state, COG, shit like that. So, I mean, everybody's really concerned about when you're a kid, you think the government is there to protect you against profit-greedy corporations who are producing products that are supposed to be at least not harmful for you or harmful to you, but they don't. And so the federal government has to get back into the transparency business of protecting the citizen, protecting his liberty, protecting his health, and protecting his bottom line. All of those things are what the federal government should be doing, and they're doing just the opposite. So it's corporate fascism, corporate capture, right? Public-private partnership, when the government and corporations work in tandem against the American citizen. All right, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live on Rumble at 10 a.m. All the news that you need to know. I don't cover things like plane crashes and stuff. That doesn't really affect you unless you're on the plane or relatives are on the plane. But we're talking politically here, what you need to know in and out of the United States. All right, thanks for joining me today. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. And I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order